Here's a question. Are books with manly heroes on borrowed time? A leading expert on Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton says traditionally masculine attributes are falling out of fashion amid a drift towards a more gender-neutral society. So I am delighted to say that same expert and polar historian, Joanna Grochowicz, is here to tell us more. Joanna, everyone. Lovely to see you. So you're an expert on Shackleton, and obviously part of his story is very much traditionally masculine virtues, and you see that with Captain Oates and all these sorts of figures. Yeah. What exactly do you mean that those sorts of virtues are under threat?
Well, actually, it's not just in polar, in literature that these manly attributes are falling out of favour. I was just talking to somebody in the green room, a woman, and she said, what are you here talking about? And I said, manliness. And she said, what's that?
Oh, right. So people have forgotten what that means.
So, I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? I think that the word manly is, everybody understands what it is, but people are actually quite afraid to use it. It's becoming obsolete. And the other fellow in the green room, when he heard that I was here talking about manliness, he said, does it exist? Well, that's a really odd question, don't you think? Particularly from a man.
Do you think part of this is that young people are sort of trying to see masculinity as a toxic thing? I mean, I've interviewed Christina Hoff Sommers, a feminist writer, and she says that she feels that young boys are almost being taught and raised as though they're girls, or punished for not being more girl-like, in other words. Do you think there's anything to that?
Well, I think that's going a bit far. I've got 2 teenage boys, and the attributes that I... with my husband, we've sort of, encouraged them to display are things like honesty, good manners, physical bravery,
yes,
moral courage. These things are not, strictly speaking, manly attributes. These are human qualities, but at the same time they're concentrated in these early polar explorers,
yes,
and I think that's why I'm so interested in talking about it, because this is my bread and butter, writing books for young adults about the heroic age and celebrating these qualities. But I feel like I'm running out of time here because, at that time, women weren't allowed in Antarctica. It was a boys'-owned club. And I think that sort of puts a lot of people off,
yeah.
It shouldn't shut people out of these terrific adventure stories. We need to celebrate historical periods that, embrace, all of these great qualities that kids need now: resilience, teamwork, curiosity about the world, perseverance. All of these are really, really important in a contemporary setting.
But are these qualities necessarily male or masculine? I mean, women can have all of these qualities,
Of course they can. Of course they can. And that's part of the problem. We're not talking about it. We're not broadening our ideas about sex-specific attributes. Manliness, I would say I know a hell of a lot of women that are incredibly manly. I mean, for starters, any woman that has pushed out a baby, you can't get more, manly than that. I mean,
seems a bit paradoxical.
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is somebody that has confidence in their body, somebody that acts decisively, that is, physically brave, can withstand a lot of pain, and, it's the ultimate self-sacrifice, really.
But maybe the objection is that, what we shouldn't do, therefore, is associate resilience and strength and stoicism with men, because actually it's something that we're all capable of.
Exactly. It's a human quality, and I think that's where it starts getting a bit murky, when people start saying, oh, well, manliness, we can't talk about that because, it doesn't include women, or we can't talk about somebody being ladylike. Mm-hmm. When I don't see that as an offensive term if it's applied to somebody. I walk into a shop the other day with my husband, and someone said, there you go, lovely, to my husband. And I thought, how gorgeous, how incredibly quaint. But there are a lot of people that find language has been weaponised. People are scared to trot out these... I suppose they're quite sexist terms,
yeah.
According to a lot of people. But, I think we need to throw open the windows and just get some fresh air and stop being so bloody precious.
Well, also, historically, would you say, I mean, you know a lot more than I do, would you say that people such as Shackleton, that manliness was important to them, that they saw themselves in terms of embodying masculine virtues?
Yeah, and I think particularly when you're looking at polar environments, you know, those extremely hostile places, manliness was an exemplary attribute. You know, when Shackleton looked at recruiting for his expedition, you know, he was looking at a broad range of skills, not only physical bravery, but also the ability to work together as a team. For example, he loved asking the recruits, could they sing? Because singing was a way of bringing everybody together. So this, I mean, that's quite manly too, being able to have a sing-along and rub along with the other guys, agreeableness, you know.
And is it your fear that because in today's climate people associate these virtues with masculinity and therefore see it as potentially toxic, that actually this will put people off studying these figures that you're so keen on? Yeah,
I think it is. And the fact that they're white men conquering new lands, this is also problematic as well.
Yes.
You know, and that's not to say that, you know, all sorts of dreadful things have been done in the name of king and country. You know, colonialism is a really tricky period to navigate, particularly in countries like mine, New Zealand, where there's an Indigenous population and you know, all sorts of dreadful things were done in the name of colonialism. But in Antarctica, it's sort of like a blank canvas, you know, and I think what's really interesting is that it reduces people to their essence. You know, Bertie Bowers, who was with Captain Scott when they perished on the way back from the pole, he said to his mother, you really get to the bedrock. You know, one's character is sort of displayed for everybody to see, and you can either find, you know, qualities to admire in your companions or ones to despise. So it really does, you know, separate those individuals and really, basically reduce people down to their essence. And because it was only men that were operating in that particular field of exploration at that time, you do get this idea of manliness. And, you know, unfortunately, part of that, particularly with Captain Scott, you've got this idea of dying well. Now, nobody wants to, you know, elevate that to something to aspire to. Certainly not me. You know, with my two sons, I don't want them to aspire to dying well. But I do want them to be brave. I do want them to look after their mates, and I do want them to look after vulnerable people. You know, one thing that manliness and manhood, you know, gets sort of mixed up in this bowl with aggression and violence, and you know, that's just I don't believe it has anything to do with manliness. You know, those are quite toxic, very toxic qualities. But you know, unfortunately for a lot of people, you start talking about manliness and they think, you know, violence and aggression.
Of course. Well, absolutely fascinating.